All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Comic Book Radio. Thank you guys for being here. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. This is episode 143. And tonight, my guest is Nina Infinity. We're going to be just talking about pop culture, all kinds of stuff. Video games, movies, entertainment. You know the drill. We don't call this show Comic Book Radio for nothing, so we're going to get a little bit of comic book talk in there too. Before we bring on Nina, I want to talk to you guys and just mention that we've got only a couple of days left on the Alterna Comics website and on the King Cryptid campaign for two things. On the Alterna site, there's a pre-order for the Behemoth resin figure. 4-inch resin figure. There's one in glow-in-the-dark and one in gray. That pre-order period ends on December 31st. That's the last day to do that. We're not going back to print with the glow-in-the-dark. We will eventually with the gray, but not the glow-in-the-dark. So make sure to get yours. Then also on both sites, I'm having a $10 sketch card sale. 3-minute sketch card. If you're not familiar with my quick cards, so here's what I do in like 5 minutes. It's a little bit less. This is 1 minute. So imagine in between. $10 for the sketch cards. You can get one for yourself on either the Alterna site, that's alternacomics.com, or on kingcryptid.com. Again, that ends on the 31st. So before I bring on Nina, let me say hello to those of you in the chat. We got Phil TMNT here. What's up, Phil? Thank you for being here tonight. Andy Gogo in the house. What's up, Andy Gogo? Manny Cornejo's here too. How's it going, Manny? Ben is in the chat as well. How's it going, Ben? Spicer McLeroy's here. What's up, Spicer? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here tonight. Buddha Bear in the chat. What's up, Buddha Bear? How's it going? Yan Zhao is here too. What's up, Yan Zhao? Hope you're having a good night. And there's Nina also in the chat. Look at that. Look at that. Wayne, what's up, Wayne? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. Power Keg Greg says, I love this scene from Rocky Balboa. Thank you, Power Keg Greg. Appreciate that. I love it too. Grape Nuka-Cola, how's it going, buddy? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here. John DeVoist is here too. What's up, John? Hope you're doing good. Unhinged in the chat as well. How's it going, Jason? Hope you're doing well. We got Fritzy Schnitzel here too. How's it going, Fritzy? Brian Suddenly Old is here. How's it going, Brian? Hope you're doing well. We got Shane O'Sullivan here. Shane, it is always... What time is it by you, Shane? Shane's over in Ireland. He's always saying good morning. It's got to be pretty early. Or late. I guess however your perspective is. But thank you for being here, Shane. We got Ara in the house, too. What's up, Ara? Hope you're doing well. Danger Vanessa's here, too. Thank you for being with us in the chat tonight. And Citizen Ronan's here, too. Thank you, Citizen Ronan, for being here. Shane O'Sullivan, 2 a.m. I kind of figured that. Man. Well, thank you, man. I hope your sleep schedule isn't too crazy. But thank you for being here, Shane. Alan Strider in the chat. What's up, Alan? Thank you for being here tonight. So is Gen X Catholic. How's it going, Gen X? And thank you, Brian, for putting up that link. Appreciate it. All right. So without further ado, let's bring her on. The woman of the hour, Nina Infinity. What's up, Nina?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you. It's the first time I'm meeting, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for being here. It should be a fun one. And I mean, we got a lot to talk about, so I can't see how it won't be fun. But I want to get a couple things right out of the way first for those that maybe aren't familiar with you, although I can't imagine that many in the chat would not be. As far as who you are, what you do, could you give like a quick little summary of that?
Yeah, I'm Nina Infinity. I'm a YouTuber, and I hang out on YouTube most of the time, and I got Twitter and stuff like that too, and Rumble now. It's probably better to support me on Rumble because, you know, YouTube gives strikes all the time. I just had to have one right now. So, wow. But yeah, you can find me. I usually talk about entertainment news on my channel. I also talk about cringe topics that I find cringy on Twitter or elsewhere. I also talk a little bit about politics here and there. I try to stay away a little bit more now from politics, just because I go back and forth a little bit because it becomes insanely crazy. Like during COVID times, I was talking about it a lot more. Now I'm talking about it a lot less because I just, you go back and forth where you're like, okay, I need to focus on politics right now. And then you pull back and so on and so forth.
No,
So
yeah, no matter what side of the political conversation you're on, it's a depressing mess.
yes, exactly. And the reason, and finally, and one of the things that I love to focus on my channel is good news. And the reason I do that is because I need to balance out the crazy, political world that I talk about sometimes, or the cringe stuff that I talk about. So I feel like I have to balance it out in this way by giving people some fluff news for a change and talking about good people and good things happening. And that's
good.
my show called Infinite Hope that I do on Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Nice. That's awesome. I'm in, I guess, the same club as you. I gotta get something established on Rumble because YouTube demonetized my channel about a month ago, I'd say, and I still don't know why. Very, very vague reasoning. They
Yeah,
did it last year too, around this time, and we'll see what happens.
I mean, I hope you get it back. But yeah, I started my Rumble last year around the whole COVID situation that was happening, and then of course the elections and everything like that. They didn't want anyone to talk about anything really on here, so I was like, unless you're talking about very just milk toast content, you're probably going to get in trouble at some point. So it's better to diversify. And even when you talk about milk toast content, like what happened with me and my strike, I actually got it on my Infinite Hope show because I was showing cute animal videos, and some company decided that that's theirs and decided to copyright strike me, not claim, strike.
Wow.
So that's what happened. And now I'm waiting out that strike right now.
All right. Well,
I know, it's
man.
crazy out here in YouTube land.
yeah. Holy smokes. Well, thank you for that concise summary of what you're doing on your channel and what your commentary is.
Ooh, I also like to play video games once in a while. So I've actually made like a video game channel now where I can
cool.
like finally like upload it to there because I felt like I was like doing everything all the time. But I love video games too. I do play that as well.
All right. Well, we'll get into a little bit of that in just a second. I'm very curious as to why, because many people, obviously, everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got their thoughts and feelings on various topics.
Sure.
What kind of inspired you to start doing this sort of a thing?
Well, I actually was inspired by Anna, that Star Wars girl. Shout out, girl. She was a big influence on me, and same with Gary from Nerdrotic. I watched their. I was in the chat. I was a chat person, and I was introduced to Gary through my husband, who watched like YouTubers all the time. And on Game of Thrones night, season 8, the final episode, I was so devastated by it that I went on Gary's live stream because I was like crying. I was like, I can't believe I wasted my entire life on this
Because it was
show.
I was going to say because it was so good.
Oh yeah, because it was so good. I was like, this is so good. I can't believe it's over.
Yeah.
No,
Happy tears.
it was the opposite, and I was like, I can't believe I wasted my life. And he was like, there's a lot of people thinking the same thing as you. You should go and check out this live stream. And I was like, what's a live stream? Like, I didn't even know what that was. And then I went there, and I was like, there's like 20,000 people talking about how this show is crap. Like, and I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. And so I started just kind of hanging out in the chats after that, and then started subscribing to like everybody that was, how like YouTube recommends, like, if you like this content creator, check out this content creator. So I started like subbing to everybody, like just like everybody, Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, EVS, everybody. And just kind of like went and hung out in everybody's chat. And then one of them was John Talks, and I talked to him. And then at some point, Anna and all these different ladies were like, why don't you just make your own channel and come and hang out with us? And I was like, I should probably do that. So I did. And then right when I did that, like literally almost a few months after I did that, COVID happened, and then the lockdowns happened. So then I started to just talk about that a lot with John Talks, and we'd made a show called Infinite Talk, and then it just went from there, and I just became a YouTuber.
Wow. Man, oh man. It's always funny to me, the origin stories of everybody, whether it's someone doing the commentary stuff with YouTube, or someone who's creating a comic, or someone who's getting involved with movies, music, books, whatever it may be. Anything and everything, honestly. I'm always fascinated by that, of where people get that inspiration, because everyone follows all sorts of different paths, and it's interesting how sometimes they converge.
Yeah.
So,
It's really cool like that. My thing was a little bit different from some people though, in that sphere, was that I wasn't so entertainment oriented. I was a little bit more political oriented as well. So it was just like mine was a little bit of a mix, because I could see the culture war happen. Like I could see the woke creeping in and doing what they were doing, and then but that was like a secondary thing compared to what was happening in actual politics at the same time. So then it kind of started merging, because I was like, I was a Disney fangirl growing up. I've had Disney stories that I've told many times, but like I was a hardcore Disney fangirl, and then it started to hurt me to see what they were doing to, let's say, Disney Star Wars, like, and how they went about how they went about dealing with Star Wars and what they did to it. And it was just heartbreaking to see the transition like from this amazing company to this kind of evil company that's just taking everything over, and fucking parasites. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we allowed to swear
you're
on your
allowed
channel?
one. So
Okay,
that was
I
it.
just had mine.
That was it. Sometimes it's momentous and people go all out, but if you
I'm
if
so
you do
sorry.
more than one, I gotta play a little video.
Okay,
You,
I'm
you
so
ever
sorry.
see Christmas Story?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I gotta give you the Life Boy.
Okay,
Uh, so you got the one.
you get the one.
But
Hey, that's a Spider-Man joke too, like from Family Guy, like when he's like
yeah,
everybody
everybody
gets one.
gets one. Yeah. Um, okay, let's stick to the positive conversation side of this, because I'm always
Sure.
because we all know about everything else right now. We're living it. But for you, you mentioned Disney. What about back in the day that you would classify that you were really crazy about, that you loved?
Well, I've told this story a bunch of times, but for your audience, I'm going to say it again. So I was born in Iran, and during that time, we weren't allowed to have Western movies, but my family always got Disney movies for me through a guy that we called the video guy. And it was like kind of like getting drugs. So he would come over to our house with a suitcase full of like,
Wow.
bootleg VHS tapes that he would tape or whatever. And then he would like open it and be like, hurry up, like pick your movie. So I had a giant collection of bootleg VHS tapes from all sorts of the Disney movies, and I was obsessed with them, including like my favorite one was The Little Mermaid, because I had identified with her struggle of wanting to live somewhere else. So I love Little Mermaid, and so I just love Disney, and it was something that was a big part of my life and my childhood growing up.
Wow. So it was kind of treated like those movies were treated like illegal contraband.
Yes, and we could have gone to jail. My parents could have gone to jail. So they were always telling me like, "Don't tell anyone we have these." I was like, "Okay," but I was like 8, so it was difficult.
Wow. So that really provides some perspective for you, especially, man. That's crazy.
I always make fun. I'm like, I risked my life to watch Disney, and now that look at what's happened. Yeah, I literally did.
Man, wow. Um, was there? You mentioned video games as well. Was there anything? Did you get into those as a kid? Was that also difficult?
No, I didn't get. Well, I got into it as a kid, yes, but I didn't actually get a system because my mom was one of those like, "What are you doing playing video games? You can't do this for work," kind of thing. So I never got my own system. So I would go to like Toys R Us in the mall and I would play like all their demo games. Like that's how I played
Oh,
like Donkey Kong and Mario and all those games, and I was really obsessed with video games. And I remember the first video game I ever installed on my PC, like my actual PC. We had like one of those, I forget what they're even called now, but they had the floppy disks,
oh
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
got like a Batman game, and I installed it by myself on DOS mode, like it was because you had to do it on DOS, and just installing the game was like a whole thing. So by the time that it was done, I was like, I don't even want to play anymore. Like I can't believe I did it. Like because I did it by myself. And so I mean that's now you know how old I am. But yeah, so it's been a weird and wild ride with video games because in my later adult years I actually got to work for Nintendo. So I played, I was a Nintendo person for a long time. And I've just always enjoyed video games. I think it's always been really fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I started off with man. When I was a kid, we lived next door to an older couple, and their son had moved out a while back, and they gave us like I believe it was the system Odyssey, I think it was called, and then they also had ColecoVision.
Oh, Coleco. Wow, that's old.
Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, that was my first, and then I got hooked at, and, and it's the covers for those that can remember. The covers to those games were pretty cool. They were painted and very nice, and then you put the game in, and it's like these little weird pixels, just a step above Pong level graphics. But it was fun, and it wasn't really like anything else that I had at the time, and then I was hooked from there. I think Nintendo, the NES, was my first actual system that my parents had bought. But it was weird and interesting on those systems, and sometimes I still miss playing those. I
Oh
don't know what
yeah.
my parents
You
did
get
with them, but
nostalgic sometimes. I mean,
yeah,
I bought the new one that they brought out because you know how like they did the whole nostalgia thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I got the NES one.
Where you got to plug them in, right? They have like
Yeah.
the thing, and then the controllers and all the games are there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I remember. Other than that, what you're talking about with the floppy disks, I think everyone's played Oregon Trail. That's just
That's old
man.
school.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That takes me back. So looks like everybody's reminiscent. Everyone's got their systems when they were a kid. Maybe you
Yeah.
guys still have them now too. That'd be great.
I just find it funny that my mom was always like, "You can't make money playing video games," and now it's like the entire industry is like making so much money. It's like our parents never like I don't think they ever saw this coming with like what
Yeah, I
happened with
don't.
the video game industry.
I still can't really wrap my head around it.
I know. Like I was reading that article the other day that was saying that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to make like I don't know, some ridiculous number like $1 trillion or something on the first day. I don't remember what it was. It was something ridiculous. Like I
A
was like, "What?
gazillion.
A gazillion billion dollars?" No, it was like something like 4 million, I think. Realistically, I think that's what it said.
That's.
But it's still insane. Like $4 million on like the day one.
I think
That's
that
insane.
might be a low number. I
It
think
might
it might
be.
be higher than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is crazy. These games are crazy. It's not like it used to be. That's for sure. They've definitely advanced in many ways. So now you are, and please correct me if I'm wrong. You're not really familiar or into comic books.
I am not American comic books. I never got into them. I got into the comic book characters through the '90s animated series. So I watched my favorite one is Spider-Man, and I love Spider-Man. I've always been a Spider-Man girl. So I was introduced to him through the '90s animated series. Same with X-Men and Batman and Superman. So that's how I kind of met those characters. But I never read the books. I was always a manga girl. Like I was always into anime,
Oh,
manga.
okay.
So I was when everybody else, like the boys and everything, was reading like Spider-Man and everything. Like when I moved to Canada, I was reading Sailor Moon. Like I was all about Sailor Moon, Cardcaptor Sakura, anything that had to do with anime girls or, anything cool and awesome. I just got into that vibe way more than American comic books.
Oh, understood. Well, it's interesting that you say American comic books because that's a conversation I have on the channel a lot about how diverse American comic books have become, and I know that's like a four-letter word nowadays. But and I'm not referring to it in that way. I'm referring to it more in the term of genre and in the terms of different kinds of stories being told by all kinds of creators out there. I mean, obviously, I know you're aware of that. It's hard to not be aware of that nowadays, but I really think that's something that putting comics in the little box of superhero for decades upon decades, for the mainstream, for the masses, is kind of hurt the genre. I think we're starting to kind of get out of that, but it's been difficult, especially now. Every single time in comics, I just had this talk yesterday where it feels like we're really getting into our own. Something
Yeah.
happens in the mainstream that sets us back again. So the indies
Yeah.
out there paving the way.
Yeah, and it's always been interesting, that comic book aspect, because I think that like one of the most interesting things to me was, for example, like the creation of the graphic novel, because at first when you're thinking of comic books, like you're obviously thinking Spider-Man, Superman, like something like that, even like X-Men or something, Batman. But like when it came to the graphic novel, like that was just something also so different than the regular superhero stories that you get, but it's in the comic book format. So then you were like, oh wait, what do we, like this wait, so comic books can be like an outlet of other kinds of storytelling, like it doesn't have to be just superhero stories. And I think that that's like a really interesting perspective as well. So even when I started to get into like that aspect, like because I was into manga, and manga can be really graphic, like Berserk, right? So there's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
of like different kinds of manga that can be really graphic like that. And I remember being like really into that. And I remember I met somebody that was like, have you ever read a graphic novel? Because it's not all like, it's not all Spider-Man and whatever. And I'm like, what's a graphic novel? And so when I
It
saw
sounds like a
that,
dirty book. Is what that
yeah,
sounds
I'm like,
like.
what is that? It sounds kind of naughty.
It's a
But
graphic novel.
yeah, once you get into it, you're like, oh wow, yeah, you guys did really get shoeboxed in, I think, with regards to comic books.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's a shame too, is because even the superhero genre is a subset, or has many different subsets of genre within it. It's not just, if anything, it's funny to me when they call it like capes and tights, that kind of a thing, because very
Yeah,
few superheroes nowadays, especially, have capes. And
that's true.
there's a lot of them that don't wear tights. So it's that kind of thing where everything that the comic industry has been doing, it feels like, over the past 30 years, and this obviously plays into the larger conversation of pop culture because it reflects it or runs parallel with it. It feels like it's at this weird vantage point where they have an inferiority complex, and they're at the little kid table, and they got to prove themselves constantly. And the underdog kind of attitude served them well for a time, but now it feels like they got accepted at the cool kid table, and with the movies and the shows and this and
Sure.
that and all, so now it's like the
The
comics, they're
MCU, like
embarrassed of
just
them.
yeah, the MCU kind of like put them in that stratosphere, right? Like it made it so accessible to everybody on Earth. Like it wasn't no longer just an American thing. It became a worldwide thing where everybody was like, well, what's the origin story of all these characters? And they were interested. They were like, okay, well, what are comic books really? And but you're right, because it did do that as well. It did do that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting to me because of the fact that comics for the longest time, decades upon decades, have been incredibly diverse, incredibly different, all over the place. The
Of
characters, the
course.
stories. So it's odd to see that conversation being pushed nowadays as if they never were.
I mean,
And
that's the
we see
case
that a
with
lot.
yeah, that's the case with everything, like TV, movies. I mean, I was what was I watching the other night, and I was like, wow, there's so many black people in this. I know that sounds really bad, but it was like
What were you watching?
it was God, what were we watching? Oh, it was Die Hard. We were watching Die Hard, and I was like, check it out. There's like so many black people in this. Like, they've got the black, like, really smart dude that was like the robber guy. They had the black FBI agent. They had the black cop that's his friend. Like, there was an Asian dude that kind of looked like you, actually, like the one of the robber dudes. Like, he was like
Oh,
he's the
that
guy.
dude's like a legendary stuntman. That dude's been in so many
That
things.
dude, yeah, he was
Yeah.
Asian, and he was like one of the robber dudes. Like, that movie was super diverse. And then, like, nobody cared though. Like, no one talked about it because it wasn't something that it's like something we all kind of were over, and then somehow we went back in time and decided like, nah, like we're not over this yet.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the whole thing is we're seeing a lot of history erasure, and we're seeing a lot of manipulation of context. You know, and we went through that in the 90s a lot with the PC period, but it seemed like it was ridiculed by a lot of people, especially within the entertainment industries. That it was like it was up for uptight weirdos, you know. And I mean it
Yeah.
still is. But it wasn't as embraced. Now it's become this weird embracing
Well, they
of
were
the
making
policing
fun of
of language.
themselves. They were making fun of themselves a lot, and then they decided like we can't make fun of ourselves anymore because that means that like we're not as virtuous as we think we are. Like we got to be the virtual police now. So we can't like that. And comedy is dead. Like it really is has basically died. I think that's probably the genre that suffered the most out of everybody has been comedy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because even up until maybe I mean there was a big shift obviously like 5 to 6 years ago with everything. There was still things here and there that were pretty good, but it really seems like that just boom a hard turn into that territory, and that's kind of it's kind of odd to see. Unhinged says stand-up comedy's going strong though. Interesting, yeah. Well, you know,
I think
that's
it's making a comeback. Like,
yeah.
because it was dead for a while, man. Like, nobody was talking about it. Nobody was talking about anything, especially like right after Trump got elected. Like, or sorry, Trump lost. I meant after that, like it went dead because nobody was talking about. Nobody wanted to touch left politicians, so nobody's making fun of them at all. And then nobody wanted to touch COVID, and then because everybody was like, scared that they're all going to die of this thing, so nobody was making fun of it. And then people started to realize, oh, maybe we should start making fun of it. But by then it was like too late because the damage had already been done and people were already getting canceled for making jokes. It's been such a weird time. But now I think with some people that kind of stood up, like, for example, Chrissy Mayer and other comedians that kind of, Lila Hart, other comedians that stood out. And these are kind of like independent comics, right? Like they're not the mainstream comic people. They kind of stood up and they showed that you could still make fun. Like you could still make fun of everything. Comedy is still alive. And I think that really affected the industry, and some of the bigger comedians were like, hey, maybe we should be making fun of these things. And I think Chappelle kind of kickstarted all of that as well with the whole, like his special about the whole, what he was going through with that trans person and everything. That was heartbreaking. It was actually a really heartbreaking comedy special to watch because you're like, yeah, it's funny, but the story behind it is really deeply sad and upsetting. And then you go and like you read about it, and then you see how much they're vilifying him. And I mean, it's Dave Chappelle, and then you're like, if they're coming for Dave Chappelle, they're coming for everybody, man. You know?
Yeah, well, and that's the interesting part is because I think everything that ruffles feathers now has always ruffled someone's feathers.
Sure. Yeah.
But like stand-up comedians, it's just like, how many things can they get away with? Every single stand-up comedian ever was like, I'm going to keep pushing that button.
Yeah.
Yeah,
George
and that's
Carlin,
kind
I
of
mean, the most famous one with the 7 words, right? You can't
yeah.
say.
You get Carlin, Pryor, Murphy. All you can go back and back, and there's so many of them. But what's I think more interesting now than ever in terms of how it's handled is the fact that it feels like anyway, and maybe I'm living in my own bubble, and I'm willing to accept that too. But it feels like the counterculture element is askew. It feels like the people who believe that they're counterculture, every single thing that they align with is actually the mainstream establishment. And that's strange. I don't
How do
think
you
we've
mean?
ever
Like, give
seen
me an
it.
example.
So people who think that they're marginalized, people who
Okay.
think that they are not part of the established system of power, the dynamic that's already there, the corporations, the governments, et cetera, et cetera. And you could see it. There's a lot of people who really believe that they're part of some kind of counterculture, that they are the anti establishment,
Yeah.
that they are resisting, that they are not a part of whatever they think. But everyone within the mainstream power dynamic is basically on their side. They're pushing them, they're giving them money, they're uh, pushing the narrative and the issues and the agenda that they have. So I don't think we've ever seen that kind of dynamic before in terms of people who believe that they're part of the anti-establishment or a counterculture. Everything before was usually being pushed against an established system of power within even Hollywood, movies, TV, comics. Comics were always notoriously counterculture, if anything.
Sure.
So it's interesting to see that, to see the table being turned, and I don't even know if the people that are within it are truly aware. But again, I can be completely wrong with it. So
No, but I mean, like, it's interesting to me that you say that because, I mean, even like people like me have been accused of being kind of like this counterculture thing. And people who still support it, even though, or like are bringing energy and engagement to it, even though what we're doing is technically fighting it. Like I hear a lot of people say like, oh, well, if you don't want to support, like, let's say Disney, like, why are you watching their shows? Like, we shouldn't even be hate watching them. And to some extent, I kind of agree. Like, I don't have Disney Plus. I don't watch anything Disney anymore because that was one of the things that I did. Like, for example, after The Last Jedi, I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm done with Disney Star Wars. I will not watch it. And people like asked me to review it. People begged me to, like, watch The Mandalorian. They were like, oh, it's great. It's going to be fine. And I was like, just wait. I'm going to wait to see where this goes. And I refused. And to some extent, like, that shocked some people because they were like, well, you're a YouTuber. Shouldn't you be talking about it and making money off of it? And I'm like, yeah, but like, first of all, I feel like there's already enough people doing that. But also, I don't see it as counterculture at some point. At some point, I think it's counterproductive to keep paying, like, to give attention to something that you shouldn't really be paying attention to at that point. I still understand why people have to do it, but I choose not to do it. It took a little bit longer with Marvel. Like, I was like, I'm still gonna watch. Like, I went to the movies. I watched it. And I was fine with it until pretty much like Doctor Strange 2, and then I was like, I'm done. Like, I even now that if I've watched, because I did watch like some Disney Plus shows. Like, I watched Loki and I watched a couple of other ones. But all of that, I was not subscribed to Disney Plus, so I can tell you, they didn't get my money. I watched it, but I didn't pay them to watch it. But like some people were making an argument like Velma got the season 2 because people hate watched it so much. But again, a lot of people don't understand that, like, for example, that series had already gotten a season 2 before even season 1 came out. So it wasn't like the hate watchers that like gave them the numbers they wanted it or anything like that. That series was already set in stone that they were going to have 2 seasons and everything. But I can understand how some people would think that the hate watchers or the people who are working against the system are actually working for the system, because sometimes it does come off like that.
well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that the system has been adapting to at this point, to
Yeah,
do that, to kind of suck the oxygen out of the room, to dominate the conversation so that something else can't have that conversation. If you're, it's a distraction ploy with that kind of thing. The marketing is it's extremely on point when it comes to pissing people off, and they know when they're doing it.
well,
So there's a lot
exactly.
of that kind of negative marketing. There's a lot of stuff they put in there that they know is going to upset and rile up
Absolutely.
certain people, and certain people will go to the internet about it and discuss it
Well,
and
they have
then
a
highlight
blueprint
it.
now. They have a
So
blueprint.
they're
Like, we're gonna
kind of playing
we're gonna put
people.
out mediocre product. We know mediocre product or even shitty product. They might even know it's shitty, not even necessarily mediocre. We're gonna put out this product. We know it's mediocre or shitty. We know people are not gonna like it. So beforehand, we gotta go in and tell them, hey, these toxic fans aren't gonna like this because there's a black person in there, or insert race here, like, or there's a woman in there, or like whatever. It's the fans that are a problem. So like, it's not us. We don't have any problems with what we're creating. It's the other people. It's the fans that they're always toxic. So then the fans, of course, get riled up, and rightly so, because they're being egged on, and then they respond. And usually it's just like a vicious cycle that just goes back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I don't know. I don't watch any of that stuff. When something pisses me off, I just don't give it my time and attention anymore.
Yeah.
On that level, anyway. There's a lot of things going on, obviously, in the world where I feel like, okay, this is just a part of it, and this is the you got to take a step back and look at the bigger picture with a lot of different things. But it's interesting because of the fact that at the same time, some people will downplay the pop culture, cultural aspects of
Of
things
course.
and say, well, that's not important. Why would they be doing this and that and the other thing? These are just make believe stories, fiction, this and that. There's
Sure.
all kinds of things going on in the world. This is the last thing that they would think of. But this is how this is what has become a strange conversation, is because the very people who this, if you talk to them, right, and you go, what about these things makes you love them, care about them? Why are you emotionally attached to fictional characters and stories? Why do they mean something to you? A lot of these people will go on and on about how much these things mean to them and how much they've meant to them over their life. And it's like, yes, and that's exactly why. That's exactly why they're powerful. And the people who are behind them and own them and know what to do with them, that's exactly why they're doing these things with them, because these things are powerful. These things do have an effect on people. If they didn't have an effect on anybody, that'd be one thing. If it was just, and I don't even
If they
I don't
didn't have
even
an
mean
effect,
monetarily.
nobody would care, though. That's the thing. If
Exactly.
they didn't.
People care tremendously about this kind of stuff. And people have cared about this kind of thing for a very, very long time. Stories go back to the dawn of civilization.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
That's one big, gigantic way, other than maybe food and a couple other things, of how people define themselves culturally, how they
Yeah.
unite or
Yeah.
can be divided. So they're important. And so to see the dismissiveness of the conversation sometimes by the very people who hold these things in such high regard, it baffles me.
Yeah, me too. I can never understand those people, because media has always been so important to me. And I was a single child. TV raised me. You know what I mean? So it's a definitely big part of my life. So there was definitely movies and things that affected me growing up, and that I saw myself in, and those characters really like shaped who I am, and those movies and things like that, stories shaped me for as who I am, and even books. And that's why when you're like read something and then you're like, wait a minute, now they're adapting this book. That's not how it goes. Like for example, Lord of the Rings, where you're like, wait, what? Like you totally ruined it. That's not how the Lord of the Rings is supposed to be done. For Rings of Power, and people get upset, and I think they have the right to be upset.
Oh yeah, well that's the sad part about it, is the weird, sneaky kind of censorship angle that some of it could take.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's odd, because people will go, well, censorship, it's a government issue and this and that or whatever. And again, I don't want to dive into the into the deep down depths of that sort of thing, and then talk about how the governments are closely connected to a lot of these organizations.
Sure.
But at the same time, when you're talking about censorship on any level, censorship of just wanting to express an opinion, if we can't be allowed to healthily express an opinion about something, love, hate, whatever, in terms of what it is, and that's as far as it goes. Just you're expressing that, not for me, I don't like it, this is why, or I love it, this is why I love it, this is, what I'm all about, whatever. If we can't do that, that's really rocking humanity to its core.
Yeah, like what's even the point?
That's a bad road to go down.
It really is. It really, really is. And I come from a society, like I said, because I was born in Iran. I've seen that happen firsthand, especially with regards to like government censorship. That's why it's so dangerous, man. You can't walk down this road. It's so dangerous when they the if any, but like book burnings and things like that. Those are real things that happen in times of crisis and times of change. And that should never be a thing. And especially even like now with the advent of course, social media, now it happens on social media as well. I mean, it's just I think social media just definitely changed a lot of things for a lot of people. I think that has a lot of the blame is to should be rest upon that the invention of Twitter and Facebook and social media, generally speaking.
I'd be a little more specific and say that a lot of the blame goes to the unseen manipulation
Sure.
of social media.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, because it's a double-edged sword, right? Like it can be used as a force for good, but it can also be used as a force of evil. I think most of the time we see the evil hand, and that's what I do. Like when I cover my show for Infinite Hope, there's so many stories. There's so many stories that like so and so like use TikTok to raise this much money for this old person so they can retire, or like this person's house burned down and then they use Facebook to get their Indiegogo or like a GoFundMe across, and people poured in and help them get their house rebuilt or whatever else. There's all these really good stories that come out from social media too. It's not just the bad stuff.
And I mean, honestly, though, it's like that with so many things. Where I mean, look at well, don't look at the news. Don't look at the news. Don't read the news. But if you were, you'd be hard pressed to find an overwhelming majority of positive, uplifting stories. Even though there's tons of them out there. There's tons of people making a tremendous difference and busting their butts and doing good things, and not asking for anything necessarily in return, not seeking power, not seeking, well, if you put me in office, I'll do this, that, and the other thing. If you give me more power, I'll make the bad situation good. Tons of people doing wonderful, amazing things for each other, and it rarely ever gets talked about. And then obviously social media, I'm talking about the engineering of algorithms and all kinds of other things like that, and the different
You're
agencies
so right about
that hire different agencies that hire all kinds of negative marketing campaigns and bots and false accounts. And I mean, this is all just it's been admitted, it's been talked about. It doesn't,
I mean, the whole
take a
Twitter
lot.
files thing is like, I mean, that was wild. Last year that was coming out. That was wild to figure out. Like all the things we knew was basically verified. And you were like, yeah.
And
it was
every
pretty
time,
vindicative.
And then I know that this is a weird way to look at it, but every time I see that, I actually get a little bit hopeful for humanity, because they have to work so hard. They have to work so hard to try to get us to constantly be at each other's throats.
Yeah, they do.
And
I mean, do they though? I mean, they don't have to work that hard. Because I feel like sometimes they'll just be like,
well, they've done a lot of research. They put a lot of time and money into it. They have to maintain an omnipresence.
Yeah,
to
it's
stay
a
on
science.
top of it.
They've made it a science now. It's true.
And that's a lot of hard work. That's a lot of effort.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Imagine if they put that effort into like curing cancer or something. Like, it's like, can you like do something good with that effort?
Or conversely, putting the effort into making sure that let's put things so people can see all the good in the world. Let's make sure that they can understand, hey, we got way more in common with each other than we actually realize. We don't have to be at each other's throats for every little tiny difference that we may have. But once you cure those problems, then it turns into, well, what do they need us, right?
What's funny is I think that this conversation kind of actually rounds it out, because I think at some point, like, in the 90s and stuff, like the good times, like we all knew this. And I agree with that statement, by the way, because you're pretty smart. It seems like I
talk about a lot of this on here. I know why I'm demonetized. They're not going to say it.
No, of course not. But I think they, like it's almost like we had figured it out. Like we talked about earlier, like we had figured it out. There was like that whole racism thing and everything like that was kind of over. Like, and we had all were on the same page. And then I think that the people that you're talking about went into like this overdrive of being like, well, we need something else. Like, first of all, we need to bring it back. But also, like, we as a society, especially the newer generation, as they were getting introduced to social media and things like that, we were all too comfortable. Like, we became very comfortable and then decided like, hey man, this is too comfortable. We need something to fight over. Like, I feel like everybody just decided like, maybe the comfort isn't enough, and then we just need to fight over something, and then it just became all this other BS.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so unfortunate, but it's tale as old as time. You know, divide and conquer.
Yep.
It's not just a war tactic, even though some may argue we're in kind of fifth generational warfare kind of thing right now in terms of social engineering and the various things that take place with that. But
I'm in
it's
that camp.
there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to show it, and that's why I think it's so important to maintain keeping up with the conversation and having as healthy a conversation about these things as you possibly can, because the day that we feel like we can't or that we shouldn't, man, that's a scary day. That's a frightening day. And and not just to highlight the things that are wrong. Now this is the part I want to take a hard turn into the things that are right and the things that have been great over the years. And maybe you can pinpoint some things nowadays that obviously aren't as great. And you can say that about any time period ever. Anyone who's ever existed can be like, well, that period of time sucked. These people were around, they were doing this and that and the other. And you could do that. If you're a student of history, you understand and know that there's been all kinds of things at all points in time where it was never just great. It was never just utopian.
I was having this argument with someone today on like something really stupid, because they were going off about how Islam is like the most, disgusting religion and savage or whatever, and like compared to Christianity. And I'm like, oh yeah, because Christianity, like, no such things as the Crusades or like the witch burnings or anything like that. Like, it's not like we don't all have a really dark history. Like, everybody, every religion, every creed, every race, whatever, human history is filled with messed up stuff. Like, we've all done very messed up stuff to each other. It's not just one group, it's all of us collectively have at one point or another been enslaved or slavers,
Yeah, and it's an unfortunate aspect of history in and of itself, where certain people have come in to hijack positive messages and positive things and turn them and invert them. And that's as old as time. And it's something where I understand the inclination and the tendency to look at something and go, that's bad, that's this, that's that, because there's been people associated with it that are that way. But at the same time, again, if we take that kind of mentality and think across the board about everything, you really could just go, you know what, how about we just all suck? How about we all suck? We're all and we're all deeply faulted.
Yeah. That's why I used to have a shirt that said, I hate everyone equally. I gotta get that shirt again, because that's true. It's like,
and let's unite over that, right?
Yeah.
Let's unite over the fact that, you know what, we all stink. We all stink, and we're all trying our damn best, and no one's perfect. No one's ever been perfect. No one's ever really going to be perfect, and that's okay. And let's try to make things a little better while we can.
100.
So, in terms of how now I can go on, and I've already gone on this channel about a lot of different stuff about how much comics, stories, things like that have meant to me. For you, what are some of the defining pieces of pop culture in your life, storytelling, characters, whatever it may be, that have really shaped who you are, that you could say, if I did not have that, if I wasn't aware of this story or that character or whatever it may be, that I would be on a completely different path in life, and I don't think it would be for the better?
That's a really good question. Obviously, Little Mermaid was the first one. And then Sailor Moon was a huge one. There's been a lot. Like, I love a little bit later as I got older. I loved Star Wars. Obviously, like, the story of Luke Skywalker was really, really cool, and it was such an interesting story, and how you can change even like that speck of light within Vader was really interesting to me. And then, of course, as I got older again, Star Trek had a huge effect on me, especially DS9. That was my favorite Star Trek. I love TNG too, don't get me wrong, but it was my favorite Star Trek DS9, and the story of Ben Sisko and just everything in that story, in that whole series really affected me. Same with Babylon 5. I love that. I love that show and the story that it had and the arc it had for Malari. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Bits and pieces. I gotta go back every time I mean to, and it's like
One of
life
the
gets
best
the better of me.
sci-fis.
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit dated, but it's definitely a very, 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 very good story. So there's been a bunch. I think because you go through stages as well as you're getting older. Unfortunately, I'm way too old now. But there's definitely like stages of your life where you feel like you become a completely different person, So like when you're a kid, like even in your
Oh yeah.
adulthood, like I'm
Yeah.
technically like when you're 18, you're supposed to be an adult. You're not. Like you're still a child. So like I feel like as I grew older and now I go back and like watch certain things that I've watched when I was way younger and let's say I've forgotten, I get a completely new perspective on certain things because it's just the way it is. Life teaches you things and your perspective changes on these things.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
What about you? Like, who was your defining moment character?
Man. So comic book wise, I always loved the X-Men and I always loved Spider-Man. Those characters
Yay!
were really really integral to my upbringing, for various reasons. It was not always easy growing up, and for again various reasons,
Mm-hmm.
and those characters and their stories and the things that they went through were just inspiring to me,
Mm-hmm.
and a bit cathartic at
Mm-hmm.
times too, of like a weird wish fulfillment, knowing that. And there was all kinds. I've always gravitated towards that, like the stories of the underdog, like everything like that's in the intro even of the show.
Yeah, I love the
Um,
underdog stories too.
yeah, and being able to persevere and overcome adversity,
Yeah.
because it's not going to be an easy life. It's going to be
Mm-mm.
difficult, and it's important to be able to and not to say that I didn't have a lot of people in my life that did overcome adversity, but I didn't know about it till I was older. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
about my grandparents, both sides. One of them fleeing the post-fascist Italy, and the other one fleeing right before communism got really bad in
Wow.
China, and to the point that my grandfather, my Chinese grandfather, and my grandma, they couldn't go back to that country because they would be killed,
Wow.
because they were part of a little movement that was
Mm-hmm.
leaving and fleeing and trying to get as many people and as many resources as they could to go, because
Mm.
they knew it was going to get bad, because they were sensing and were seeing all around them how bad it was getting. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know about a lot of that until my teenage years or so, because they didn't really like talking about it, and I would hear about it afterwards after they had passed, and
Mm-hmm.
it was really just like, wow, you read about certain things, you see certain things on TV, or a movie or a book or whatever, and then when you know somebody, and I'm having a feeling that you probably can relate in terms of how you grew up as well with your family and being in Iran,
Very
um,
much.
that
Like a
yeah
lot of
that
what you
that
just said
feeling and
was
that kind of
yeah, it's very,
yeah.
very close to home. Especially like because my mom, like she was part of the revolution. So, like she had friends that were killed, and my dad went to jail. Like he was like tortured in prison. And it was while she was pregnant with me. It's like there's a lot of like actually sorry she was pregnant with my brother at the time. My brother passed away. But
Oh,
it's
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. But it's there's a lot of things like that like the persevering. Like I ask her that sometimes. I'm like, oh, how did you do it? Like, because she had me when she was 25, and like I remember when I was 25, I was like, I can't imagine like being a mom right now. Like that is so crazy that you had me at 25, and then in that atmosphere of Iran and what they were going through. Because I was born in '85, so I was born like right at the cusp of the Iran-Iraq War, And so it was just like, and that's like right after the revolution too. So it was just like, there's a lot of the stuff that you're talking about that like my family's gone through the same things. I think a lot of immigrant families go through these things.
Yeah, and even the ones that aren't immigrants necessarily, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on within families, within where you are, what you're going through in terms of when when you're being raised and how you're growing up and where you're growing up and what time period you're growing up in. There's all kinds of factors. That's why it's interesting to me in the scope of storytelling, the universal connection that exists, because there's stories that are thousands of years old and yet they've stood the test of time and people can get something from it. If we had changed so much as people, if we could not relate to one another, all of these stories, you'd read them, stories that are hundreds of years, thousands of years old, and you'd go, I have no idea what the hell any of this is. It must have just been like, it'd be like reading something out of an alien species.
Yeah.
But instead, so many of these things have stood the test of time in such a tremendous way.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love history like that too. And that's one of the things I always talk about as well with regards to like new material to adapt or whatever. Because like, for example, that's one of the things in culture that we see now is like this kind of like, now it is actually like cultural appropriation that's happening. Like with, for example, with the real BBC making like Anne Boleyn black, and you're like, that's like a historical figure. So like it's the, those things happen. And then I always talk about like there's so many African stories and mythical stories and all these really cool tales that have been passed down through generations and generations, like
unbelievably fascinating history and culture.
Really cool stuff. I mean, the Iranians, Persians have the same thing. Like we have the stories of Rostam and like, all these different, that's kind of like the equivalent of Hercules. So we have like all these different tales, and I'm like, how come nobody's making movies about this stuff? Like there's all this cultural things that we could be making movies about, and like staying true to the vision and the characters and stuff. Like there's so much to explore from our human history, but let's just like race swap Anne Boleyn. Like that's where we're at. Like, and let's just, call it a day. Like, I mean, it's so crazy to me. I'm like, you can make so much stuff if you just look at history.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. And that's what's so interesting is the fact that it feels, I mean, it is purposeful, but it feels as if there is a designed thing to not go into that aspect of it, to not go into actually shining some light on all the different aspects of stories and culture that have existed with various peoples throughout history. And instead kind of just treat it like, and this was really weird, we live in a time where everything feels like it's like reverse psychology.
Yeah.
If someone tells you, I'm doing this for your safety, that means they're trying to hurt you.
Yes.
If someone tells you
100%.
we're doing this to create an atmosphere of peace,
especially the government,
they're going to ramp up the war.
Yeah, if the government tells you I'm doing this for your own good, like, dude, be afraid. Somebody in the chat, I got to give a shout out. Somebody in the chat said, World Comics Review said, when's Shahname's cinematic universe? And that is an amazing comment because that's that's what I was talking about. It's like the Persian history. It's like the tale of Rostam is part of Shahnameh. And that's when's the Shahnameh cinematic universe? That's a great comment. I always talk about that. I'm like, why don't we have, like, Shahnameh needs to be told. It's like an epic tale. It's like this, like, people would love it. It has everything. It has everything like war, hate, like love. Son dies in father's arms and he didn't know it was his son until the final moment. I mean, these are the things like that real good stories are made of. I think it would be awesome to tell those stories.
These are the kinds of stories that unite people across the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. They're like, we don't need those. We don't need to be united. Damn it.
Yeah, we want to try to divide as much as we possibly can. So instead, we're going to do this and that and the other thing, and then we're going to blame you when you call us on it.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are done in the name of the superficial diversification of things that are actually, when you really look at it, it's cultural erasure and various other things being done. So it's interesting when that comes along because of the fact that it's not doing at all what people claim. And then when you dive deeper, not even that much deeper, it's corporatized. So when
Yeah.
it's corporatized, it's for profit.
Yeah, it's always for profit. I mean,
It's
everything is pretty
that's
much
the
for profit
motive.
these days.
Yeah, and in one way or the other, whether it's to make money or to control, that's the profit metric as well. That people will go, well, it's losing money. Why would they keep doing that? Because it controls the conversation, because it controls the mind and the thought, and it also kind of makes people, and it's sad that it does this, but and for some it doesn't, which is great. But for a lot of people, it kind of squashes their ability to want to create, to want to put something out there, because they go, I don't want to get torn apart for my creation. I don't want to get, wow, I saw what they did to this individual. What are they going to do to me? You know, so if I put my story out there and I put my viewpoint out there, and it's of this, that, or the other thing, in terms of someone can say that that's cultural appropriation, or that's not diverse enough, or that's whatever. You could pick a million things and just get really weird with it and tear it to shreds. And you'll have people that censor themselves. It's
Yeah.
so then you get self-censorship. You don't even have to have a mob of people coming along and censoring. You don't have to have the government step in. You don't have to have anybody step in. You
So
have the
true.
person going, I'm too afraid to do this, so I just won't. And
Wow, you're hitting some nails in the head for me, man. Yeah, it's true. You're right.
yeah, so it's
Happens. I think I've been guilty of that to some extent. Like thinking that maybe I shouldn't make this video, or maybe I shouldn't do that, or put this out, or whatever it is. And I'm like, that's a form of self-censorship. And you're right. It
yeah.
does happen.
Yeah, and as storytellers, it's so important for us to be able to go, "Well, it matters to the story. Is that at the benefit of the story? Does this add value to it? Is this important? And if it is, I have to tell that." And there's so many people over the years, I've had conversations even privately where they're like, I didn't want to put this kind of character or make, that person this way because I didn't want to get attacked. And it's so unfortunate, but that's a part of it.
Have you ever seen that not episode, like that interview with Stan Lee where he's talking about how he made Spider-Man?
Oh, what you mean in terms of how he was inspired to do that, and you saw like the fly on the wall and that whole
No,
story?
no, no.
Or-
When he had the concept for Spider-Man, and then he told, like, he went to sell it, and then the people were like, "Ugh, nobody's gonna want to buy this. Like Spider-Man, like nobody likes
oh
spiders."
yeah, his publisher was like, Stan, you idiot! People are scared of spiders. They don't like
Yeah.
them. What are you doing?
Yeah, and then he was like, "Well, I went and did it anyway," and then apparently they did like it. It was such a good interview, and he's like basically saying, like, don't listen to anybody that says that that's not a good idea. Just do just whatever
Yeah.
you want.
And that's what I love so much about a lot of people out there right now that are independent creators, because a lot of people are creating fearlessly, which is so important to do
Yeah.
when you're a creative individual, to explore the possibilities, to make the impossible possible. Otherwise, if we keep on, and that's again shifting to what I was talking about before about the counterculture kind of thing, where I'll see so many people want to lift up and defend the poor gigantic mega conglomerate. Will someone please think of them as opposed to the independent creative?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing, because it's like you're defending people who don't need to be defended, first of all, and these companies that have done horrible things to the various
don't care
creators
about
that
you.
they've stolen from and done various things from.
Yeah.
They don't need your defense.
Yeah.
The time in which when a lot of these things were like, look, going back to Marvel, let's say in the 60s, pretty much ran and behaved like an independent comics company. It wasn't this big giant corporation. It was just a handful of people,
Yeah.
and just trying to do whatever they could do to stay
The
alive.
good
at
old
that point
days,
in
man.
time.
The good old days. See, that's what happens when you become too big, right? Like that's when the creativity gets lost. I think that's what happened to Disney too. It's like at the beginning, Disney was just this little company, and they just wanted to make animation and make like people happy, and it was like this whole thing. Like Walt Disney's vision was, very different than what's
Vicious
happening now.
taskmaster too.
Yeah,
Boy,
well,
oh
I mean,
boy.
but he was a visionary, right? I mean, it's the same thing with Hayao Miyazaki. I don't know if you are familiar with his
Oh, yeah,
work,
yeah.
but he's like that too. He's a taskmaster, because he's a visionary. He's not going to sit there and be like, I'm not going to tell you what to do because whatever. He's old school. Like these old school people used to work. They work and they would tell people like, this is the vision and got to get with the vision. Nowadays, you get me too'd for that because it's like, oh, so and so was so mean to me on the set of whatever. Like it's like, and then constantly the visionaries now are getting like, knocked down because they were like a little too rough with everybody's feelings or whatever. The industry is changing too. Like that's the craziest part. I mean, some of it is valid because you shouldn't go around abusing your staff, but some of it is dumb because people are turning out to be like a bunch of snowflakes in this generation, and they can't really understand like constructive criticism or like how you have to actually freaking have a drive and like have this thing to get to that goal, to get to that end, right? You have to keep going, and it's not easy to achieve it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Man, I can't believe we're at an hour 7. We were supposed to just do an hour. So I apologize.
It's a good time, dude. I like it. It's
over.
been really fun.
But yeah, it's been a great conversation. Before we wrap things up, I do have one question for you. Now, you had mentioned a bit. We mentioned a lot about obviously your love of pop culture and all different kinds of things on that respect. If you had the ability to make any change at all right now that you would think that okay, this is what would make things better. This is what it would. This is what. You have godlike ability at this point.
Oh boy.
What would that be? What would you go in there and do?
Well, I mean, if I had godlike abilities, I probably would get rid of like all war and everything. I don't know. That sounds.
We have to just stick to the.
We just have to stick to like
just
comic books and stuff.
No,
Okay.
just stick to entertainment and storytelling and cultural type stuff.
Did you watch the new South Park episode, the Pandaverse?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so what I would do if I had like godlike powers, I would probably get rid of the Pander Stone. And I would get rid of like just everybody that's been come in contact with it and at some point been like, yes, that is what we should do. Clean house, okay? Like, so people like Kathleen Kennedy and freaking JJ Abrahams, like all of those fucking
you know what you know what this means, Nina. You know what this means.
I only got one.
You made
me passionate. So
okay.
embarrassing.
Continue.
All of those bad people. I know people are saying shame on you. I know. I'm so sorry. I get a sailor mouth when I get passionate. So all of those bad people, Kathleen Kennedy, all of them, they all got to go. And Bob Iger, all of the people who are related in one way or another. Oh my God, the new guy, not the new guy, it's the same guy. The guy that's doing Doctor Who. What's his name? God, I forget the Doctor Who guy's name, but he's ruining everything. Russell T Davies. All of these people gotta go. Just you're fired. You're gone. You're gone. We gotta get new life in. People who think like you. People who are passionate about the topics. Like, if I was gonna give Star Wars to someone, I give it to Anna, that Star Wars girl. Like people or Ryan Kinnell, because like they've read the EU and they're actually familiar with what the heck is going on in Star Wars, other than what Disney gave us. So give it to creative people. Not hold them back, not tie them down with lists of like, oh, you got to have this many black people in it, this many, androgynous people in it, and this. Take all of the pander stuff away and let people create. And that's what I would do.
I can't argue that. Well, the thing with that too is some people go, well, then how will people be represented? Everyone will just be like a white guy. Right?
Sometimes you won't be represented, and sometimes you will be.
I argue that there will be more representation.
Yeah, because there were in the 90s there were more representation than ever before.
It'd be even more diverse.
Yep.
There'd be even more different stories, different characters, different people in different roles.
I agree with you.
Because it wouldn't be about, well, do you fit this superficial box? It'd be about, well, what are you bringing to this role?
Exactly.
How are you creating this story? And everyone would then have the ability to be inspired to create their own stories. So even people who believe that they're underserved would feel like, you know what, I can create my own stuff too, and do whatever it is they'd imagine that story should be and how it should play out. And they wouldn't have that fear of self-censorship that they bring upon themselves. So I think we would have even more diversity, and it would be truer diversity than corporatized diversity, which loves homogenization. Corporate culture loves sameness. So
I was reading a book recently by Anthony Horowitz. It's called A Twist of the Knife. It's like a little detective story, and a part of the story, there's a guy he's talking to. He's like this native, a native guy. It was a native character, and he was pissed off because he thought that Anthony Horowitz, who's writing as himself, like he's the main character of the book, but he's literally like a writer in the book. So he's like talking to Anthony and is going like, you're going to write about me, aren't you? But like, you're going to like write in your white way, like, how I'm to be represented and all this stuff. And Anthony was like, well, if I just wrote about myself, then, and what I know, then everything in media would be filled with the white man's viewpoint. Is that what you want? Like the native guy was like, no, that's not really what I want. So like that's, I think you're exactly right. If you don't tie people down, you don't tell them what to do, and you let them just be creative, there'll be more diversity. There'll be more representation. There'll be everybody would want to create more.
I hate the mantra of write what you know too, because write what you know turns into everything is insular.
Yeah.
And
that's
so
literally the self-inserts.
Instead of it turning into, if you don't know about it, research it. If you're not familiar with a topic, if you're not familiar with a biographical type story, if you're not familiar with certain people, certain types of whether you want to talk about ethnicity, classes,
culture.
Whatever it may, culture, etc., the whole 9 yards, all of it. That's what so many people used to do, was familiarize themselves. Just sit there, listen to people. Observe,
people used to travel.
Learn.
People used to travel, like, and be like, okay, if I don't know about this culture, I'll travel to like wherever the culture is, and I'll learn about the culture. Like they would like live there for like a month or two. They would learn. They would eat the food. They would learn about the place. They would visit the historical location. Cultural appreciation. They would learn about it, and then they would write about it through their viewpoint of how they perceived it or how it came off or whatever. And then people would read that and be like, oh wow, that's really fascinating, because not everybody can have that thing of traveling there and seeing it, and that's how we share our collective knowledge with each other. And I think it's become a lost art, man. I really do.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
Yeah, but man, well, this was a terrific conversation, Nina.
Yeah,
I have to be perfectly honest, this was better than I thought it would be, and I don't know what I thought it would be. I'm not saying I thought it would be bad, but it exceeded my already very high expectations.
I feel the same way, because I came on here being like, I'm so nervous. I don't know anything about comics. I don't know what we're going to talk about.
I find
here
a
we
way.
are.
I'll
Yes.
find a way.
You did great. Thank you.
I'm glad that we were able to have this great conversation. Everybody, thank you guys so much for being here as well. All of your comments in the chat were great. Some person, I like that comment, but I'm not going to highlight it on the screen. Read a book. I'll just say that. Yeah, everyone should go read a book, a comic book, a good book. Good stuff.
Definitely, reading books is great.
Absolutely. Man, thank you so much again. Before we go, where can they find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube, of course, at Nina Infinity, and you can find me on Rumble at Nina Infinity, because that's probably better. And I'll help you, Peter, if you want to set one up. Let me know. I can assist you. And you can find me on Twitter at Nina7Infinity, all the places at some type of Nina Infinity. And also tomorrow I will be going live on my channel at 2 p.m. Eastern for Infinite Hope. So if you feel like you need some hope back in your life, and you need some fluff news and just like understanding that there's still good things happening, come and hang out with me at 2 p.m. Eastern. We have a good time there.
Awesome. Well, the link to both Nina's YouTube and Rumble is in the description of the show, so go and subscribe to both if you're on both, especially. And thank you guys so much for being here. Again, thank you, Nina, for your time. We went a little bit over, but I think it was well worth it. Appreciate you being here, and thanks again for the conversation.
Really good time.
Great.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, guys, everybody, have a wonderful night. I'll be back tomorrow night with the Comics Division at 9 o'clock Eastern.
Comics is great.
Yeah. So he'll be on here at 9 o'clock Eastern tomorrow night. So I hope to see you guys here in the chat. And again, until tomorrow, everybody have a great night and an even better tomorrow. See you guys
Happy New Year, everybody.
And a Happy New Year if we don't see you.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Bye.